then we shall do so. We now convene the meeting of the Design Review Committee. Annette, you want to call the roll for us?
Yes. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Committee member Baranek?
Here.
Committee member Schmidt?
Yes.
Committee member Vanden Eyck?
Here.
Vice Chairperson Funk?
Here.
And for the record, Chairperson Newsom is absent, so we have 4 present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, do I have a motion to approve our agenda for today?
I'll make the motion, please.
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to call the roll on that?
Yes. Committee member Schmidt?
Yes.
Committee member Vanden Eyck?
Yes.
Committee member Baranek?
We'll give her a
Committee
chance.
member Baranek?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, and Vice Chairperson Funk?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, this is now the time in our agenda where for public comment, this is an opportunity to talk about anything that is not on the agenda today, but is under the jurisdiction of the Design and Review Committee. We're technically not a really exciting venue for public comment of that nature. So then if you have public comment that you wish to offer, please use the raise hand function on Zoom or press *9 on your telephone. Or let's see. Yeah, I guess either one of those would be the options. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And since we don't have a time limited public comment, we don't have to leave it open for 30 minutes the way City Council does. Thank you for having us get that clarified. So we'd now for the consent calendar, which consists of the minutes from the last session. Do I have a motion for approval?
Yes, I'll make that motion also, please.
And I'll second that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to call the roll on that? And we'll.
All right, committee member Schmidt?
Yes.
Committee member Vanden Eyck?
Yes.
Committee member Baranek?
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Funk?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. So now we're on to the feet of the agenda for today. Our development project review for the design and neighborhood compatibility review of storage container at 7130 Serena Court. Take away. And I think just in time, Mariah's back with access to a working computer. We appreciate everybody's patience with our technical challenges today. And I now see you actually I see you on Kelly's visual and I see your name separately. So
And you're
muted.
Sorry, we're still.
Oh,
I'm still here.
it works. It's Thursday.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, we're doing a little computer juggling right now. So I'm just going to have Kelly's name on the screen, but my name is Mariah. So
Thank you, Mariah.
You're over
Okay.
here.
Okay, let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint and then we'll get going. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. So today we're talking about a cargo container at 7130 Serena Court. So again, the property address is 7130 Serena Court. The property that we're talking about is 1.23 acres in the residential single family Y zoning district. And this lot is technically considered a double frontage lot, which we'll talk a little bit about in a little bit, but you can see at the top, it just barely touches one side of Serena Court. And then this is actually an unbuilt right of way, but this is also Serena Court that hasn't been built out. So here's an aerial view of the property. So there is currently a cargo container on the subject property, and it is.
Mariah,
Oh.
we're not seeing your slides advance.
They're not moving.
Uh-oh.
We're seeing the main,
We're the title slide only.
We see in the left-hand corner,
your whole thing.
Oh, maybe I'm doing.
Maybe you're on the wrong screen.
Or maybe you have to dismiss the little
or
notice about update.
Maybe I'm sharing the wrong screen. Okay.
maybe click on number 2 or something.
Okay. Let's see. I feel like this is going to work.
There we
Yes.
go.
Okay. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
telling me. Okay, no problem. So this is the property. You can see it touches again Serena Court a little bit here at the top. And then this is the unbuilt right of way that I was referring to. That is also Serena Court. So we're calling this a double frontage lot since it's got a frontage on one side of Serena and then also on the other side of Serena. Okay, can you see my screen still? Okay, perfect. So yes, the property does currently have a cargo container, which is located within the Serena Court right of way. You can see circled right here. Again, that right of way is unbuilt, so it's not super clear, you know, that it was being put in the road at the time, but that is the city's right of way. A little bit of background about the project and why it's coming to you today. So this unpermitted cargo container has been on the property for about 11 years. It's been used for accessory storage of private belongings. It was placed on the property when the home was originally built, and then it was never removed. So people are allowed to have cargo containers for storage during construction. They are supposed to be removed prior to final occupancy, but this one, for one reason or another, remained. So it's been out of compliance since the house has been finalized. The container was brought to our attention by a complaint through the code enforcement process. And then again, with this process, we also discovered that it was within the Serena Court right of way. So it couldn't remain where it is, even if it was approved. So to be legally permitted, the container needs to be approved by DRC, and it also has to obtain a building permit, be on a permanent foundation, and meet all the building code standards that would apply to it. The cargo container standards per the municipal code are the following. So cargo containers are allowed to be used as accessory storage on single family residential lots greater than 1 acre, which this one is, subject to design review committee review for neighborhood compatibility. And then they'd also require approval again of a building permit. They do have to be located on the rear half of a property and be consistent with underlying setbacks, which we'll talk about. So this is just a drawing, a rough site plan of where the cargo container is, where the applicant was requesting to move it. So the applicant is requesting to be as close as 5 feet to that rear property line, abutting that Serena Court frontage. This is also near, this is an oak tree right here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's an oak tree nearby. This is an existing shed that I believe was built around the time of the cargo container or after, but that's unpermitted within the right of way, and that's to be removed. So now to move on to setbacks. Again, this is considered a double front lot. So the front setback would be at least 25 feet, and the second front, or the sort of the rear front, can be up to 1/2 of that required front setback. So for this situation, the required setback from the second Serena Court right of way has to be at least 12.5 feet away. So if the design review committee doesn't approve the cargo container to be on the site, it will need to be removed. And just so you're aware, we've been notified by the applicant that this might require a substantial dismantling process. It might completely destroy the cargo container. So that's something to be aware of if it does need to be removed. So this is just an image showing what the cargo container would look like if it was moved that 12.5 feet back from the right-of-way line. You can see it'd be right where a tree is. There's also a significant slope. Right now it's sort of sitting at the top of a slope, but it does slope down significantly. So moving it really anywhere on this slope will require additional grading, potentially retaining walls, I'm not sure. But we wanted to bring this before the design review committee to talk about the compatibility before we ask the applicant to do all the engineering and spend a lot of money on the project, because we wanted to know if the DRC was comfortable approving it or not. So here are some photos from the site. The cargo container is just a standard cargo container that you see. It's this light kind of tan color, so it does sort of blend into the surroundings. These are just a couple photos on the site to give you a little bit of an idea of the topography and location. So you can see it's a pretty significant slope, and it's sitting right at the top of the slope there. So moving it would require some engineering for sure. And these are the photos of actually from the next door neighbor's property. Actually, the cargo container, which we'll talk about in just a second, is visible from Serena Court. If you're not aware, is pretty close to downtown, close to City Hall. So there's some areas around here even that you can see it, but the most impacted person is most likely the neighbor, since it sits at the same grade as their house. It sits up from the applicant's, up from the applicant's house and at grade with the nearest neighbor at the very top of Serena Court. Just some places that we noticed it was sort of visible to the public. This is actually taken just in our own parking lot in City Hall. We had to zoom in a little bit to show you there, but you can see it a little bit from the City Hall parking lot. And then this is from sort of in front of the Bank of America parking lot near the bus stop, sort of. So you really kind of have to look for it, but technically it is visible, and moving it even down that hill will probably, it probably will remain visible from some of these public spaces as well. So some discussion items that we'd like to talk to the DRC about are the location of the cargo container and the setbacks to that Serena Court right of way, and what's appropriate in terms of site view for the surrounding area. The design of the cargo container, if it should just remain that tan color if it's approved, or if it should be a different color, more landscaping, those kind of discussions. And then finally, we want to talk, based on the design review committee's decision, we want to talk about time requirements for either removal of the cargo container or permitting. For example, the applicant has to apply for building permits within this timeline. They have to obtain building permits within this timeline, and then it has to be complete within this timeline. So we can kind of talk about all of those things, but right now staff is available for questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly, or Mariah. Sorry, it's like I'm looking at you and I'm seeing Kelly's there.
It's confusing, that's
right.
okay.
It's been a long day already. Okay, Dennis, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. Could you go back to the first site photo that you showed? This, the one after this. So this is looking up from the property owner's home to where the container is located now.
Correct.
Okay. From what I heard, the cargo container is accessory by definition.
Yes, it would be considered an accessory structure.
What defines a permanent foundation?
So that would be something that would be, basically it has to get a building permit, and the foundation would have to comply with the California Building Code and be approved just like any other structure.
And just as an example, they vary quite a bit. A permanent foundation could be a deep concrete footing with steel supports, or it could be as simple as compacted decomposed granite with screw-in anchors that are at the adequate depth. So they vary all over the place based on soil type, slope, and based on what can be determined for that particular site. Hopefully, most of the time, they're literally just mobile home anchors in a compacted base.
Okay. Recently, at the Planning Commission, we had another item, a different item that dealt with an accessory structure, however. And there was a definition that was provided that the accessory structure had to be behind the primary home. Is the cargo container not meet that same definition?
That's for larger accessory structures that exceed the floor area of the house or exceed a certain percentage of the house. So for smaller ones, we don't have those same definitions.
But that is actually, yeah, that's like Phil said, what you're referring to is for larger accessory structures, but it is a good point because cargo containers are required to be on the rear half of the property or on the back of the property. And this property is actually a double front property. So it's kind of a unique situation in
I guess
that-
wherever you put it, you're going to be between the house and the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the interpretation has been sort of if you're on the back front, that's the back for these kind of situations.
But from the aerial photo, obviously although there is a point of the road that touches Serena on the other side, there is a common driveway. It looks like there's a driveway easement that's shared between the neighbor and this home to get
Mhm.
access.
Correct.
Okay. So obviously the setback request is being made because of the slope of the area behind in this area where the cargo container is at this point.
Correct. But the design review committee, so if the design review committee wants to approve it, it will have to meet at least that 12.5-foot setback. There's no discretion to change the setback to shorten it.
Is there normally when buildings or accessory structures meet the setback requirement, there is a height requirement at that point? In other words, I think what's it, 12 feet or 10 feet, that the building can't be higher than a certain point, and if it is, then it needs to be set back further because the building might be, let's say, 15 feet high. Does that apply in this situation with the height of the cargo container?
No, so there's special exceptions that the DRC can make if the structure is 6 feet or less tall to be as close as 5 feet to a front property line. This one is taller than 6 feet, so it has to meet the regular setbacks. And then as long as it's within the regular setbacks and they're not asking for any setback exceptions, it can be up to, a building could be up to 30 feet tall in the single family zone.
In this particular photo, there's the home next door, which I'm assuming is the same level as the existing location as the cargo container. Is that the home of the complainant?
I
Well,
think that's,
I don't know that we usually like to give out where the
Okay,
complaints are coming from. That sometimes results in retaliation, and
okay.
everyone may know that's not usually something we publicly like to.
How does the home next door on this photograph access their home?
so access, and I think the owner will be on. I can't remember. I believe you continue to go up Serena. I think the driveway is here and I remember driving
Okay.
up. So I think it's a really long loop.
But it comes the same direction and eventually curls off and comes down to where this is located.
Yes.
Okay. Why isn't there screening being requested in terms to mitigate the view of the cargo container from areas around the city or from neighboring homes?
That's certainly something in discretion of DRC, even if we may have not have brought it up. It's certainly in your toolbox.
Yeah, so the purpose was to talk about, and that was just something I briefly mentioned. Yeah, if the design review committee wants to move forward in improving a location for it, you can certainly, we can talk about, colors and landscaping and screening and all of that kind of thing.
As in the one photograph site photo, the unit is above the concrete slab of where the house is located, maybe what, 20, 25 feet in elevation. I didn't look at the contours. How is this assessed from the home? Do people walk up the hill with stuff, or can they drive a car over there and unload things or put things in the car, or how do you get there?
Yeah, so it is, I was out there quite a while ago, but I believe you just kind of have to, it might level off a little bit at some point, but it's a little bit of a hike up there. There's no road or clear path.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, Mariah, forgive me, but you mentioned something about that the setback could be reduced to 5 feet if the structure was less than 6 feet tall, right? Is that what
Correct.
you said?
Mm-hmm.
Is that from natural grade? If they were to put this down because there's slopes, if they were to put it down to 6, so it's only 6 feet above natural grade, would that count, or does it still have to be 12 feet, 12.5 feet?
Ooh, Phil, you might have to weigh in the natural grade versus. Did you hear that?
I missed part of that question. I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that, Jeff?
So the question was, Mariah had mentioned that the setback could be reduced to 5 feet if the structure was 6 feet or less in height. And the question was, if the applicant, this thing is presumably 8 feet tall, maybe 9. If they, since there's a slope, if they were to set it into the ground, does it have to be measured from natural grade, or can it be, the setback be reduced to 5 feet if it's buried? I mean, if it's set below natural grade.
We'd have to take a look at that in our code closely and determine that. I mean, and cargo containers are kind of their own separate animal too in terms of setbacks, but typically even accessory structure is buried in, and its height would be measured from that final finished grade. But there's different ways our code is written on different types of structures, so we have to take a look at that. I'll see if I can find that answer for you while we're still talking. Okay.
And I'm looking at Google Maps, and it appears that the neighboring property up the hill, their right of way or their driveway doesn't seem to follow the right of way. It seems to veer around to the easterly side of their building and to the south. So there's nothing constructed in the actual right of way itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's unbuilt. So the cargo container is just fully in the right of way, but it wouldn't be clear unless you knew that was the city's right of way.
And to access this, I know that Dennis just asked this, but do they access this from where their driveway portion is? There seems to be retaining walls all along there, or can they access it along the southerly part of their building?
Probably a good question for the applicant.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have for now.
Okay. Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm having video questions or video issues.
We can hear you.
All right.
It's hard to see the raised hand, but we can see that. I missed that at first, but we can hear you. Thanks.
Great. For staff, what is the likelihood that Serena Court would ever be extended?
Well, I don't know. Don't know that answer right now. Somewhat unlikely, I would say, but you never know in the future as lots develop and things get subdivided, but it's due to the slope and tree coverage and the lack of subdivision activity that can occur out there. It's unlikely. There's a lot of roads actually that were designed during the colony era that just either aren't necessary or really aren't buildable from
Right.
today's engineering and safety standards.
Sure. And it just made genuinely not make sense. But I guess my question was getting to, if it were to be developed, how would the setback requirements on a double fronting lot affect the placement of this?
Well,
Like,
it wouldn't
if this
change
were
either
to
way.
become a real frontage,
We still have to respect the setback, whether it's developed or not.
of course. But
No.
if it was developed, would it require a larger setback?
No, it's
Okay.
still the
12 and a
same.
half.
Yeah, it's still the same situation, whether it's an undeveloped street or it's a developed street.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I mean,
I,
the option in cases like this, the neighbors should really discuss the potential, we haven't examined this, of whether this right of way could be abandoned.
Mhm.
And then all these property owners would benefit from possibly receiving a portion of that right of way or being able to purchase a portion of that right of way for their
Mhm.
property for their own use, if we're not currently using the right of way and if we can meet all the streets and highways codes finding. And it may result in something good.
Yeah.
And that's worth exploring.
Okay, any other questions, Emily?
Yes, a couple. I'm just trying to.
Go
find
ahead.
them. I can't tell on the site plan from Roberts Engineering because I can't really read any of the topo lines, but do you guys have an approximate slope for that area? Both, it's actually primarily where you're proposing it be relocated. Do we know what the slopes are in there?
I don't know what the exact slope is. And yeah, we're not necessarily proposing that it be relocated there. That would just be meeting the setback. That's where it would be located. But I would say it's probably around 20%. It's pretty steep.
And what's the cutoff for, what's the slope cutoff for standard building permit application and or use permit?
So moving more than 50 cubic yards on slopes over 20% triggers an environmental review.
Okay. So it's not just the slope, it's the volume of movement. So theoretically, they would only just require a building permit in order to put this at the 12.5-foot setback location?
Yes, if they didn't trigger that threshold. I will say when the applicant first came in with a proposal, they were showing it. Let me see if I can pull up a better picture. I guess not. I guess this is what we have. They were originally showing it somewhere sort of around here. And I think there might have been some concerns about grading and engineering. I'm not 100% sure, but oops. But there, might be other places to look at that we can discuss with the applicant.
Okay. My two concerns in relocating it all are the slopes and the trees. It just seems like a very complicated site to try to do this on at all. So I kind of understand why it's just been left there. But it seems like it wouldn't get put on this site now for those same reasons. So
yeah, and the applicant might expand more on this, but he told me at some point that the cargo container, so it was there during construction of the house, and then it was really difficult to remove because of its location once the house was built and everything was graded out. So I think that's another reason maybe it stayed there.
That makes total sense. It looks
It's
like
kind of, it was built
marooned.
on the property.
It's marooned up there.
has there been any conversation to our knowledge about access to it for removal using the neighbor's parcel?
What?
I heard you, Emily. It was kind of, you kind of sound like you're underwater a little bit, but
Could you repeat the question? Because I couldn't understand it.
I think I can say it, Emily, if you want me to repeat it.
I don't know if I'm having it here. I'll move it a lot closer. My question was simply whether we knew if there'd been any conversation between the neighbors about access on the adjacent site or removal of the container.
So I don't know what the conversations have been, but I would imagine they might be open to it. But they're probably both on and can probably speak to that.
Okay, those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. I had, in addition to the questions that my colleagues have covered, I want to understand a little bit better about precedent. This is the first cargo container in a residential area that I've seen come before DSC in my time on DRC. So I'm just wondering how often this has come up, and under what circumstances have cargo containers been deemed compatible with residential communities in the past?
It's a great question. There's actually hundreds and hundreds of cargo containers out there in the city, unfortunately. Many of them located and built prior to us having these rules and regulations and determinations. Many of them that are unpermitted and haven't been turned in as code violations. And many of them that are allowed on sites as part of a temporary construction permit during construction of a house. And that's when they don't require DRC. So we've taken very few of these forward to the DRC because we just haven't had that ability, or people haven't applied and we haven't brought them through the process. But we have done several. Most of them have been on commercial properties. And in most of those circumstances, they've been in locations where they've been behind structures. They've been painted, you know, a color that blends in with their surroundings, and they've been landscaped or fenced off, and they disappear. So we haven't done a whole lot of these in this kind of scenario where we're getting complaints and they're in a very visible spot on a hillside and that sort of a thing. So these things do tend to be precedent setting. We do need to be careful with that. This one has to move no matter what. It's in the public right of way, and the city can't take on the liability of a structure in our right of way. So yeah, we have a problem in this scenario, and the applicant will need to decide whether, well, based on DRC's determination, whether it's worth moving, and if it is able to be moved, you know, if the DRC could be satisfied with mitigation such as screening and location and all those things. So do you have anything to add to that, Mariah? Do you recall any that we've done and permitted permanently on residential sites through the DRC process?
Yeah, no, I've been here for almost 4 years, and this is my first one. I seem to recall maybe a complaint or two, but ultimately, usually people just remove them. But this applicant has decided to move forward and try and permit it. So this is the first one I've seen.
Okay, and am I correct in an understanding that this particular container is not terribly visible from the owner's property? I mean, if you look up the slope, you can see a little bit of it, but it's, you know, largely screened by the hillside itself to the owner. But it is on grade with and quite visible to the neighbor, and visible to the community from distance view shed.
Yes, I would say that's a fair analysis. Yeah, I mean, it is sitting on a hill by the neighbors or by the owner's property, but it's not probably an area that you'd really look as opposed to the neighbor where it's at grade. They have quite a nice view up there, and this is clearly in their view. And then I'd say from the public spaces, it is visible as you saw in the pictures. I'm not sure if you would notice it if you weren't looking for it, but it is visible once you are looking for it.
Yeah, okay. So if this were, if the house were being constructed now, this would be permitted during the period of construction, and then would have to be removed.
Yes.
Okay. So we're clearly looking at an exception just because the thing's been here for a while and it's inconvenient for the owner to move that.
Excuse me.
Right, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we're not sure how, I don't know, we have the record of, do we have that, Mariah, of how it, whether it was something that we did actually approve during a construction permit or?
Yeah, I don't think we were able to. We pulled all the records for the house being built and that we couldn't find anything about a cargo container. So it's kind of lost to history maybe.
okay. I think that will cover me for now. And I would be interested in hearing what the other folks, what the owners and other commenters have to say. Dennis, go ahead, come again.
On the building permit site plan, was this shown on the building permit site plan for the home?
I don't believe it was. I'd have to verify, but in talking to our inspector that pulled the records, he was saying there was no mention of a cargo container.
So there would have been no condition on the building permit that says remove the cargo container because one, it wasn't maybe shown on the site plan, and two, it wasn't known whether it was on the property or not at that time, I would assume.
I don't know that we have definitive information either way on that.
Okay.
We're not seeing it on any of the permit records, but I think you know, I don't know that we could add any more to that.
Do
Yeah.
we know that this is public right of way? Was it accepted? And is it public right of way? I mean, usually there's timelines on acceptance. Is
But-
this public right of way?
I believe
It is
it's
public
just
right of way.
on on the original map. It's just a
Yeah,
history.
whether we accepted it or not, it's public right away on the map.
Okay.
So
Anyone look at building records at the assessor's office? Often when appraisers or people who work for the county for the assessor's office visit sites, especially at the time of building permits or at other times, they will mark down that there is these things on the property. Was there any investigation into that?
No, I didn't pull the residential building record, but the owner clearly stated that it's been there for 11 years. We've heard that from other people, so we're just trying to help them sort of move forward. We don't know exactly how or why it's there, but now we're trying to deal with it.
And so beyond the offer to move it either 5 feet or 12.5 feet away in the same location, has there been any other discussion to place it somewhere? For instance, there looks like there is room along the concrete pad next to the home that it could be. It was offered in the one area because of it may be not considered because of the slope of the land. But let's say if I look to the if this is due north straight up, I don't know. But if I look straight up from the home, there's the concrete pad or the concrete driveway that comes up. There's an area that there is no trees. It might have some type of slope going down. I don't know. But has other areas been considered by the property owner beyond where he's at now and the one that was offered earlier, the one suggestion offered earlier?
Yeah, so I think it's a good discussion to have with the property owner. We haven't gotten into too many specifics because we wanted to sort of have the discussion here. So I think that's a good discussion for them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other committee questions before we go to the public? Seeing none, I will open this up for public comment. It is our tradition first to recognize the applicant and hope that the applicant will address in particular questions that have been raised by the members.
So if you're on, I see a couple phone numbers here. Go ahead and press *9 to raise your hand. And then we can let you on. Oh, perfect. There we go. And then you just have to press *6 to unmute yourself. There we go. I think
How's it going?
Good.
We can
Good.
hear you.
So this is Mike and Debbie Schufert at 7130 Serena. So you can ask whatever questions of me that you need.
And you're the property owner?
That is correct.
One of the questions that had come up from the committee, were you able to hear the questions that the committee had suggested might be good for you to address?
Yeah, we've been here listening to the whole meeting. The problem with moving it from where it is it's an access issue. The slope is too steep to move it down closer to where our residence is without completely dismantling it. And at that point, then there's no putting one of those back together. We've actually had a crane company up there trying to see if they could move it with a crane, and they were unable to. And I also had heavy lift helicopter company, and it was not cost effective. So that's why we are suggesting just moving it off of the easement or the road, that's the paper road up there. And that's actually not Serena Court. I don't know if it makes a difference, but that is actually Pinal. So it's actually a different road altogether. So I don't know if that changes the easement, the setback requirements or not, because we are addressed off of Serena Court, which is clear down there where the point of the property is.
Okay. Let me also just clue you in for while we are a little more casual in how we operate DRC, though in general, in public comment, we ask you to speak, and then it's not we typically don't do a lot of back and forth.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just how we work it here because of the
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's why we proposed where the our site is for now, because we are unable to move it down the hill in one full piece. It's not able to be moved. The slope is too steep to get it away from there to drive it. When it was originally put up there, it was put up there in 2010. There was actually a drive that went up there, and it was on the back of a truck. They dropped it off, and we stored our stuff in that because we were getting ready to try to build a house that did not start for another 6 years. Oh no, 5 years, something like that. I don't know. It took forever for us to get permitted. And so it was there well before we ever even started the permit process. And we thought we were going to actually build up a little higher on the property than where we wound up. So that's, it is, we actually do see it pretty clearly from our house. When you're outside, you can look right up there on the hill. It is visible from our property as well. And I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but I know that in one of the towns that we used to live in Oregon, that there was actually view restrictions and things like that. And I was told that there is no view easements or view ordinances in Atascadero. So I'm curious as to why a view like that is even coming into play when it's on the back corner of my lot, just like what the ordinance is written now. I understand that it's on a paper road, which is owned by the city, which will probably never get developed, and I would be open to an abandonment situation, but when I asked about it before, I was told that is not a possibility. So when we built the house, we did pay for a variance with that road to not have to improve the portion that we were against. So
Okay.
I don't know what else I have to add to that. So
If we have questions for you at the end, after we've received all public comment, we may come back and recognize you again to respond to questions. So to keep an ear out if there's anything that needs to get clarified or that we need to ask. Okay. Other persons who would like to be recognized to talk, please press *9 or use the raise hand. I guess everybody's on the phone, not Zoom. So you can use raise hand on Zoom or press *9 if you would like to speak. I know we did receive a number of comments by email. And if members have had a chance to read them, do we typically read those into the record? If they were received?
We do not read those into the record anymore. They're posted on the city's website. We did have one that came in late last night that we were able to send to you this morning and post online this morning. But we're not reading them into the record anymore, but because they're on the website, available for the public.
Okay. And those of us on the committee have also received, we've received like 3 of them. I mean, different.
Yeah, there's 3 total.
Yeah, okay. Good enough. Is there anybody online who is wishing to speak? Going once, going twice.
Don't have any fear. You can speak. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, it's *9 to raise your hand.
There's a lot of people there, so
Yeah, that's why I'm pausing here, because I'm seeing folks on the line and assuming that we're wanting to weigh in on the discussion, but I don't.
they can be shy. They can always send over a written note or something to me if they want. Well,
Okay. Then I'm going to close comment. Since seeing nobody else wishing to speak, we do have the comments that have come in by email also that we should consider and discuss. So I'll bring it back to the committee for discussion. Dennis.
I have a question of the applicant, please.
Go ahead. Let's and if we've got any other questions for the applicant, go ahead and lay them out.
like
and we'll
back in the attendees, we do have a raised hand, Susan. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we want to open up public comment again. Oh, they.
Yes, I will reopen public comment because I saw that we had people that were there and we weren't seeing people get on. So, and we'll keep it open so that the applicant can respond to the question. Before I reopen public comment, Dennis, go ahead and tell us what the question is that you want the applicant to address.
My question is more of, he seems to be at some point willing to try to move the container, and due to expense and due to trouble and possibly trying to crane it down and move it down, I'm surprised that the expense portion hasn't come up. If he's willing to put this much money into these other alternatives of trying to move it, why not put the money into just getting rid of it and taking it off the property? That's my question.
Okay, so keep that one in mind, and I will first recognize Riley McGinnis, and then we'll recognize the applicant for Dennis's question.
Yes, this is Riley McGinnis. I would like to point out,
Wait, can I hear you?
not shown on the aerial map, is a solar array just to the west of the cargo container. And the solar array would be in the place where he's proposing to move the container. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes, we heard you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. So we'll ask the applicant to address both the solar array and why not just get rid of this one and move and build a storage shed in a less contentious location. So go ahead and let me recognize the applicant again. And if you can bring the 9130 number is our applicant. So you can bring them back on.
Ellie, are you on that?
Pardon
No.
me.
Yeah, I'm not sure which phone number is the applicant's. Is
Oh, the one ending in
9130?
9130.
So just to
Thank you.
clarify, Susan, I think there was another member of the public. Did you want to hear from them before the applicant, or the applicant and then the other person?
The raise hand that I've got up right now is 9130. So whoever that is, they're on.
Yeah, this is Mike Schubert again.
Okay, that's okay.
Actually, the solar array actually sits further down the hill, and it would not be in the way of where we were proposing to put the C train. The cost to move the C train all the way down the hill is the issue. That's the prohibitive part. If we aren't able to keep it up there on the hill one way or another, then it will have to be completely dismantled to come down, and then then we wouldn't have it anymore. We wouldn't be able to use it as storage. So that's the reason that we're proposing keeping it there, so that we can still continue to use it, because it's not cost effective to bring it down the hill.
Okay. And okay, you're the applicant's numbers is the only hand I see raised. So last opportunity, if you want to weigh in on this, other than the comments received by email, please use *9 or raise hand on Zoom.
Mariah, did Public Works weigh in at all as to whether there would be any slight possibility of entertaining an encroachment permit? I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just curious if we vetted that through the Public Works team.
No, I didn't ask, but I
Okay.
didn't.
I can check in with them. I know we normally can't permit private structures in the right of way.
I wouldn't think so. It's a long shot. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that question is answered, just because that seems to be
Sure.
where this discussion is going, that it either needs to be demolished or he needs to have it stay there. And I don't know that there's an option to have it stay there. So I don't typically think that we issue encroachments for a structure.
It's an interesting question, though. Do they need an encroachment permit just to move it? It's in the right of way.
Well, but not to demolish it.
No, just to move it. I mean, to go on the right of way, to pick up the building and to move it 6 feet over. Do they need an encroachment permit to
Technically,
do
they
that
would.
activity?
To do any work in the right of way, they would need an encroachment. But yeah, Kelly's going to reach out to Nick's team if she can right now while we're talking, just in case questions come up associated with that. But what I'm typically understanding in these scenarios is we don't even have the ability to do that. We allow temporary encroachments and things for utilities and for temporary parking and things like that, but not for a built structure.
I was able to check in with our city engineer, and we would not issue an encroachment permit for the cargo container, because it would set a precedent for multiple properties all over the city for private use.
So it seems like there's not really, I mean, from staff's perspective, and DRC definitely can weigh in, but it does not appear, if that can't be moved physically and it can't stay where it's at, it seems to me the only option here is to demolish that cargo container. And unfortunately, that seems to be it.
It sounded like there was an option to move it a little further down the slope, right?
So the applicant, and I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of what Mike had said, so I might be repeating him, but at some point they did provide that site plan, that sort of drawn one that I showed, of just moving it out of the right of way about 5 feet. So it wouldn't be in the right of way anymore, but it still wouldn't meet that 12.5-foot setback.
Okay, and that's not a permit that Public Works would be willing to issue to move it to that spot.
So I think Kelly checked in and they wouldn't allow it to stay where it is. I don't think they could say anything about moving it if it's out of the right of way.
Okay.
But then from the
Right, it would
planning,
just need, yeah, if they don't meet the 12.5 feet, they'd have to apply for a variance and get approved through planning commission.
Mhm. Okay. I have some real concerns about the neighborhood compatibility of a storage container that's that is so visible. It's the idea of that kind of for a very industrial looking shipping container to be as permanent storage on the site. What you were describing with the way this worked in commercial properties, in the precedents that we have are sites where that could be put at the back of a property and be made not very visible. And in that case, it's not causing any problem to anybody. It is something that makes a residential area look much more industrial. Tacky for for a neighborhood that's got a lot of nice natural features to it. So that's I'm having some real concerns about it, about setting a precedent that would be acceptable, because to have something that is where the technical back of the property has resulted in this being up on a pedestal and much more visible to others, even though it's convenient for the property owner to be there. And I'm having some concerns with that. Is anybody else, were other people thinking on the compatibility issue?
Yeah, I can say that, if they could get it further down the slope and screened, then I could see that. But the way it is right now, it certainly couldn't allow that continues in that way. There'd have to be some kind of screening and maybe setting it down a little bit so it's not as visible from neighboring properties and also from town itself. Maybe changing the color so it matches the colors of the green of the tree, so it kind of blends in. But right now it does appear like it sticks out quite a bit, and my feeling is unless we can get it, I don't know if they can move it in 12.5 feet, have a 12.5 foot setback on those steep slopes, what that's going to happen. I mean, what that's going to do to them, whether or not it's even feasible at that location. But I mean, my recommendation is that they move it a minimum of 12.5 and then screen it and possibly paint it a different color. If not remove it in.
Always coloring things always kind of befuddle me, because it seems to me has to be almost like a chameleon, brown at one time of year, green at another time of year. And so it always kind of puzzles me when I hear that conversation. I'm surprised, this particular area, there's some, as mentioned earlier and shown from the photographs, there's some beautiful views of the city in this area. I don't know what the prices of the homes are in the area, but I'd say, because based on the view, I'd say they could probably get a good price for their home, or it has a good value to it. And to me, it seems like a conundrum to have homes that have beautiful views, that are beautiful homes, and then have this container next to it. To me, it seems like the value, I mean, if the gentleman who owns the home or anywhere in the area would say it had a house for sale and I was buying it, I'd question that container and why it would be there as a buyer. And if I bought this property from the property owner, or if they sold it at some time, I would definitely ask for it to be removed. Because it just doesn't, for me, doesn't match the value of the property.
Yeah, I think that the criterion here is that the DRC would have to find to have it stay is compatibility with the neighborhood. And
I did want to note,
Mhm.
sorry, Susan, Emily did call in for a better connection, and I believe that she has her hand raised, and I just wanted to let her know that you can unmute at any time. We've got you in as a speaker. And
okay, great. Go ahead, Emily.
Just a reminder, it's *6 to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I never remembered that part.
Looks like
Oops, looks like we lost her again. Okay, well,
We'll see if she comes back. Okay.
yeah, get it down because I do want to hear from her on this. What are the consensus I'm hearing is yeah, at least are the rest of us comfortable with what Jeff articulated in terms of that if it's going to stay, it would need to be moved with, to honor the 12.5-foot setback, move to a location that is less visible and be screened and to at least consider the color. For screening, I don't want to see you just put up a big wooden fence and have it look like a giant industrial trash enclosure. I think I'm looking for natural screening, vegetation, plant some ceanothus up there, or some nice things that can. For me, if it's going to stay, it needs to not look like a shipping container. Look like blend into the natural environment. And with good screening, you can make that not a problem. I'd also encourage us to facilitate discussion with the neighbor above about whatever access might be needed in order to physically handle the container, because that's going to be complicated, but they stand to benefit if it's no longer sitting smack dab in the middle of their view. We're hoping that Emily is going to be able to call back in to us one way or another. Can somebody reach out to her and also, if necessary, have her call in to somebody's phone and we can put her on speaker?
Emily, if you're listening, you can call into my phone, my office line at 805-470-3488, or you can call into my cell phone at 805-538-9256.
I think we are trying to get her on the line. We'll see if that can work out.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get her linked in.
Yeah, her phone is going to straight to voicemail, so she might have hit something with her reception. I thought that she was at her house, but maybe something went wrong with her internet or her.
Yeah, or it's going to voicemail because she's trying to connect into us. We'll take another couple of minutes here to see if we can get that firmed out, because she's been here for the discussion. And I'd like her to weigh in if we can.
We're going to shoot her a text and see if that goes through better.
Okay.
Thank you.
And appreciate everybody's patience with the challenges of technology. This is one reason that broadband is high on the city council's agenda of things that we want to accomplish for our community.
I will tell you that Lorelai's been in meetings all day on broadband, and we're trying to make progress. So
very good. and whatever the resolution here today, the applicant has had the advantage of 11 years worth of extra, or at least since the house was completed, a number of years of extra usage of the construction era storage container.
So we've made a couple attempts and I'm not sure that we're going to get through to Emily. So I think at this point we can continue.
Okay. Well, it seems to me like we have a consensus among the three of us. Am I correct on that? So,
I understand what Jeff has said. That would be, if you want to say consensus, for me, that would be the least that I would agree with. For me, I think it just should be removed. We don't know, if it's in such bad shape to pick up and move or to do things. What's going to happen if we leave it there? Anything could happen at that point. I just, to me, bite the bullet and remove it. That would be my preference. I would go along with Jeff said, as part of, if you want to say it's a consensus, I'll go along with that.
Yeah, I would be comfortable with it being removed also, but am willing to go with letting it stay if it can be moved out of the right of way, with a proper setback, with screening, natural screening, which means that they're going to have to put some irrigation up there probably to make that work, or wherever they put it on site, so that it is not obtrusive so it no longer looks industrial in character.
And if those would be added as conditions to the building permit, if that's the direction things go.
That's a question for staff.
Yes.
What was that question?
Yeah, yes.
The mitigations and the discussion that Jeff had about the setback, the coloring, the screening, those things, those would be attached to the building permit as conditions.
Yeah, even before being conditions, they would have to come in and meet those qualifications before we'd issue the permit. And then, yeah, the landscaping and coloring and those kind of things, those would be conditions, but the setback and the landscape plan would need to be shown with the building permit.
Okay.
Yeah, so my thought is
Jeff,
it's on the applicant to be able to show that he can actually move it and get it out of the right of way and with the setback. And if not, then it's up to him. He can choose to demolish it too and remove it.
Was there
I did
another?
want to note real quick that it looks like Emily is back.
Okay. Let's
Wanted
try
to
this
point that out. I
again.
know you might not be looking at the attendees. So Emily, you are able to unmute with *6 if you'd like to add something.
I have nothing to add, but I am back. Thank you.
Was there another question, Mariah, that you wanted the committee to address? Wasn't there a timing issue?
Yeah, so based on the committee's decision, I just want to talk about real quick, and maybe Phil can weigh into, we can talk about some timelines of when we want these things to happen to make sure that we can enforce the permitting or removal.
Thank you, Mariah. And yes, what we're concerned about is this is an enforcement case. We do need to have this item removed from the right of way. We need to give an adequate amount of time for that to happen. Whether he's going to demolish it or find a location on his property that could meet the setbacks and screening requirements. or demolish it and rebuild it, use the materials to rebuild another structure, as long as he gets a permit to do that. Those are options that are on the table. But I think that, you know, if DRC would like, we can offer some timelines of how long we think that should occur, given current just timelines it normally takes to do those sorts of.
Yeah, I would appreciate some guidance on that. And with the thought that in this situation, since there are some physical challenges to how to handle that object, that we should be inclined to be generous in that time frame, in the allowance, so that it can be, just because it may be hard to get hold of the right people. Not just everybody can do this particular piece of work, even if it's the matter of dismantling it and getting it out of there.
I think the timeline refers to when he should get a permit, right? Because after that, then there's more time based on the permit requirement, isn't there?
Well, there's a little, I mean, if it's a demolition permit, it could be done, it could be issued and done in a week. I mean, if you wanted to apply for that, and someone could get out there with a cutting torch and cut that thing into pieces in about 3 days. But, you know, hiring the right person to do that and getting that all going, I mean, if I was to throw out a timeline, just a rough idea, I would say that 6 months to get it, a demolition permit or a new permit to move it, and to have that work completed within that time frame as well.
There's an interesting comment you made about the cutting torch. Would there be concerns about dismantling it with a cutting torch? I mean,
Certain times a year, absolutely. So we hope you do that during the burn season. So if you did that in the summertime, there is definitely a concern. That's an extreme fire hazard. So, but with the right equipment, it can actually be done.
Okay, so yeah, I'd be comfortable with a 6 month time frame on this.
And Phil, I'm sorry, did you say 6 months for applying for permits or 6 months to have everything done? What, can you repeat?
So it really depends. So if it's going to be removed from the right of way and demolished, 6 months for that work to be completed, done. If he's going to actually apply for a construction permit and relocate it on the property, and he's able to figure out how to do that, you know, I would suggest a time frame that is, you know, probably applying for that permit within the next 90 days and completing that work within 6 months of the issuance of that permit. So a total of about 9 months. So those are my thoughts of how long it takes to get things done of that nature.
I think that's fair.
Okay, Emily, are you okay with that time frame?
Yes, that makes sense to me as well.
Okay, and are you okay with where we're going with this in terms of the guidance to the applicant?
Yes, I think instruction to either remove by demolition or by relocation to a spot on the property that meets all of the standard requirements also makes sense.
Okay, do we need to do this in the form of do we need a motion and a roll call vote, or is guidance to staff sufficient on this item?
I think it would be good, but I've got everything written down, so I'm really clear as far as your recommendations. But if someone wanted to make a motion and just kind of list all that again, then, but I've got it. I've got it all written down, so it's very clear what you've all said as far as your recommendations. Yeah,
the question is simply, does this action by the DRC need to be formalized in a vote, or are you?
I know for consent and for minutes and approval of agenda, it does.
I believe because this is an actual DRC action, not just a recommendation, that it probably does need to be recorded as a vote under the new.
Got it. Okay.
So does Jeff, you want to make that motion, please?
Yeah, so in that case, I move that, was there a recommendation? Is it?
It's not written, but
Not
from
written. Okay, then I move that we instruct the applicant to either apply for a building permit, moving the structure outside of the right of way, meeting the step back requirements and includes screening of vegetation, or demolition of the structure to be done within 6 months. The demolition within 6 months and the construction within 6 months of receipt of a building permit, which should be applied for within the next 2 months.
Does that match what Annette has written?
I think originally Phil said the building permit within 90 days.
Okay, 90 days instead of 2 months.
Also, someone had mentioned about talking to the neighbor to facilitate removal by access by way of their property. I didn't know if you want to include that in your motion or not.
I don't think that's up to the applicant. We don't need to put that in our motion.
Okay.
Was there coloring of the unit involved also?
If it's screened properly, I don't think it needs to. The coloring needs to. It matters.
Okay.
Okay, is there a
It sounds
second to
like
the
we
motion?
need a second.
Yep,
I'll make the second.
Okay.
it has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Then call a roll.
Okay. Committee member Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
vice chairperson Funk.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
great. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everyone giving their attention to the matter. Okay, we are now on to committee members' comments and reports. Anybody have anything? Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, as we're going through the updates that we are in the city, I think cargo containers are the most hideous thing to have within residential areas. I can understand some need for storage as we have it now, which is a temporary storage during construction. I can understand that, but permanent, I just oppose. And I'm wondering, is that something that we need to take care of within our ordinances at this, or can we? I haven't looked up this particular discussion at all and don't know how well it's addressed within our zoning code. But to me,
I also think it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, because I've seen some very nice looking units that are set up as ADUs that are out of shipping containers, and they're colored nicely, and so.
in the front yard of there, I mean, are they
Oh.
screened or how are they placed? I mean, to me,
Well, they're set up like a house, but I haven't seen them here. I've just seen pictures of them. So.
well, we do have some commercial spaces downtown made out of them.
Yes,
too.
I was going to mention that very attractive, very popular new wine or drinking establishment.
Well, to me,
that's-
if we
there's not a lot
can
of those,
kind
yeah.
of nut this down so we don't have as much confusion about it, would be nice.
Well,
Yeah.
back to Dennis's comment, we do have ordinances that do speak to this topic. Right now, the city does require, first of all, a construction permit for the permanent placement of NAC train. Placing one of them on a commercial property requires design review committee approval. More than one requires planning commission use permit approval. So it's quite a high level approval. And on a residential property, we only allow one, and it requires a construction permit and design review committee approval, such as what we would require with this one if it was to work out. So there already is a process. The problem is you get companies like, and I'm just going to say it, like 777 auctions, and they sell these things all day long, and other companies, and they don't advise their customers that these things need a construction permit, they need design review. And so we get these placed illegally all the time. And there's so many of them that we don't see them oftentimes until we get a complaint, and here we are. But oftentimes we get complaints and people remove them, and they don't end up before this hearing body. We don't have an unusual situation. So we already do have codes, we already do have enforcement, and we do have a lot of these that we're working with that haven't made it to the DRC because they get taken care of, or nobody complains about them, and the city does not have a proactive stance on enforcement. So it's already been a big topic for a number of years, but if you wanted to bring this more to the forefront, it might be something we could also discuss, with the city council to see if they want to take a more aggressive stance on enforcing them. But right now the stance has been complaint driven.
So
What-
the code, sorry. So the code right now says building permit, these type of things. Does it also include like the, need to be behind a building or screened in some fashion?
Well, they are an accessory structure, so they do need to follow all of those property development standards of any other accessory structure in terms of number and location and screening and landscaping. And so they're the same thing, and because they're all, for the most part, they're all greater than 120 square feet. So they all fall into the construction permit and accessory structure category. Oftentimes we see them as, they're a building material, and actually, I think they can become a really nice building material if done right and done appropriately. But a lot of times we see that, the rusty ones with the labels all over them that are haphazardly placed on a property, and, and they give the rest of them a bad name. I can't blame people. They do make a wonderful storage. They're very sturdily built. They're pre-made. They're well watertight and animal proof. So they make a wonderful storage container for a lot of purposes, but people should be advised that they do require city approval to put on your property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And is that something that might be addressed in the context of the general plan update?
Could be.
We're considering standards.
Yeah, sure.
Neighborhood standards, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That seems a good time to do a check-in on a variety of those things that affect the character of neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other committee member comments or reports? Seeing none, I will turn it over to the director and ask him to update us on the stock ADU plans and anything else that he would like to fill us in on.
Yes, actually, there was a meeting going on with the regional ADU plan folks at the same time as this DRC hearing. And if Kelly's still on, she can give us a quick update because she was in that meeting while she was managing the background of this meeting, but I missed it. But I know things are moving forward. Kelly?
Things are moving forward. They're entering a construction document phase, making sure that all of their plan set meets all of the city and building code requirements. They're also starting their informational brochure phase where we're going to have multiple forms of information available for people that want to do these ADU stock plans, and not only related to stock plans, but to the development of ADUs in general. They are providing some informational brochures for us and some website information. So all of that should be coming together in the next couple of months, and we look forward to getting those out there to the public and helping them utilize those as a good alternative to a custom designed ADU, and hopefully a little cheaper.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Phil.
Other stuff is happening. I don't know that we have a project that's gelled far enough along that it gets on the DRC calendar in the future, but we did get an official application for the Del Rio Marketplace after DRC's initial review of that particular project, and that one's going to be moving forward now to the Planning Commission and then the City Council, and that's where the Valley Fresh Market is going to be located, just north of Del Rio Road at that northeast intersection of Del Rio and El Camino Real. So that's progressing forward nicely. And we're still working with the Barrel Creek team on the other side of the freeway to get a design package together for that particular project. And we're also meeting with other teams on the Dove Creek property and the former Walmart site to get development projects on those properties, but those haven't come far enough along to become development submittals yet at this particular time. So a lot of things in the works along those lines, but I'd be happy to answer your questions about other projects that are happening in town or other items that are going on.
When are we looking at full occupancy on La Plaza?
So actually this week, our team is doing a final walkthrough on the larger building. So it is seeking its final approval. There are already commercial tenants doing improvements in the downstairs, and there's residential tenants getting ready to move into the upstairs of the larger building. Residential tenants are already moved into the smaller building. It has a temporary occupancy, if not a final occupancy this week. So we're wrapping that up very quickly. In terms of full occupancy, they're still seeking a couple more commercial tenants in the larger building and a smaller building on the downstairs floors. And we're hopeful that they're able to negotiate those in here soon, because we are desperate for more kitchens in our downtown, more restaurants in our downtown. And that's what we would like to be able to attract and incentivize. So it's moving along nicely though. I think we're gonna see some activity there very soon. There's the biggest restaurant named Cielo is building its improvements right now as we speak, and it'll have access to a rooftop bar, and that'll be the first big restaurant open in there after we see the yogurt shop, which is almost ready to open now on the corner. So pretty neat stuff. Really, really exciting.
Yeah.
Beautiful building, beautiful location. And not long after it opens, we're going to dig up the street. And so I hope that's not too much interruption. But
Is that for the parking improvements?
yes, that would be the downtown infrastructure enhancement plan, which we're working on a construction package for right now as we speak. Wallace Engineering is creating those plans, and we'll be seeing a design set later this year for that.
I had someone asking me about a timeline. So when do we think it would be constructed?
As soon as possible.
Next year?
So that's always tough to say. So here's how the process works. Wallace is going to work on, usually they start with a 30% set engineering for us to proof and look at and provide feedback to. Then they go a little further with it. Once we come up with a pretty much an 80% engineered set, we'll have to go to council to be able to go out to bid for the project and get the final comments on all the details of that design. And we would hope that we can get there with a start and awarding a contract for construction next year. And I say that next year term vaguely. These things take time to churn through the process. I mean, so we've awarded the contract for the engineering consultants. That's a huge step. The next would be getting those plans and awarding the contract to a construction firm to actually develop the first phases of the project.
Now,
The main thing is too, is we have the lion's share of the funding. We're still looking for a little more, but we have a lot of it.
So Phil, are the concept plans completely complete so that they're just working on construction documents? They don't have to come back to the public for any kind of—
That's right. Now, the concept plan has been approved by the city council, but I will say it's a concept. So once you engineer it out, it always results in refinements, and those refinements will need a second look by us to make decisions on certain things like paving type, tree type, lighting type, dimensional characteristics when we get down to the, this and that, and whether we're going to include into it, water retention and detention features to preserve our downtown watershed management plan. And so that we have, places where we can mitigate watershed that's in the public right of way. So things like that we hope to incorporate. So we'll know more of that as time goes by. But in the coming days, in fact, even in the last couple of weeks, you might have seen survey teams out on El Camino Real. You might have seen some potholing and digging around out there and exploring. That's part of that construction plan creation.
Okay.
Great.
And do you have any word on the Denny's property?
So it is for sale, and the reason it is for sale is because they were asked by corporate to do a number of improvements that they could not afford to do to keep up with the corporate imaging. And based on how the business was doing, they decided not to continue to do that. That's why they sold. They were in escrow, but unfortunately the person that was interested in buying it wanted to do a drive-through restaurant. When they found out after reaching us that that was not an acceptable option in our downtown, they fell out of escrow, but I think it's going back in. A lot of interested parties. That property has a lot of options that can occur with it because of its size.
Mhm.
And it'd be neat to see another restaurant in there, especially one that might have a dining out front and a patio or something, and something nice like that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a little shocking when it closed. My daughter went there the Sunday. I think they closed on Monday, and they went on Saturday night.
Yes.
for their drama program as
We knew that was coming. Yes. Yes.
so those kids didn't know. They're like, what? It just closed. We were just there.
I know. And it was doing okay. It wasn't that it was doing that poorly. It's just that, when someone's asked to do a couple $100,000 of improvements, they have to balance it up. Okay, is this worth it? Or, and that's how these franchises are sometimes.
Mhm.
You know.
And where do things stand with the Galaxy Theater and its property owner?
I haven't heard much about that lately, and so that's a good sign. And so I'm hoping things are stable. The theater has been getting more and more occupants, and it's been more and more attractions. Movies are getting better again,
Mhm.
and we're seeing the crowds come back. So I think they're churning along, and I would just love to see something happen with the properties surrounding that. And we're continuing to reach out to those property owners to help facilitate something happening there. But nothing big yet has come to the surface.
Okay. Thanks for the updates.
Thank you.
If anything else, do we have a specific, let's see, we have our next tentative meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 12th. Do we think that's likely to happen or not?
I don't know that we have anything.
We
early.
don't have any items scheduled right now, Phil. It's there's nothing on the schedule, so.
May not
Okay,
happen.
So we will adjourn to either the Thursday, May 12th or call the chair. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.